the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us here this morning.
Good morning, Anna.
When the sun came up yesterday morning, Jeremy Hunt was just an unsuspecting backbench MP, enjoying a family holiday in Belgium. This morning, he woke up with the keys to number 11 and the task of keeping Liz Truss's government afloat.
Chancellor, can you steady the ship or has it already sunk?
In a hefty round of broadcast interviews, he replaced the key pillars of the government's ill-fated mini-budget with a reality check.
There were mistakes. It was a mistake when we're going to be asking for difficult decisions across the board on tax and spending to cut the rate of tax paid by the very wealthiest.
And it was wrong to fly blind and to announce those plans without reassuring people with the discipline of the Office for Budget Responsibility that we can actually afford to pay for them.
His message, the so-called Treasury orthodoxy that his predecessor so readily dismissed before his sacking, is back in business. Warnings, too, of unpalatable policies to come.
Well, I'm going to ask all departments to find more efficiencies than they were planning to find.
But there are going to be difficult decisions on tax as well. They won't come down as quickly as thought. Some taxes will go up.
The government will now be asking itself two big questions. Is Hunt's appointment enough to stabilise the markets? And is it enough to stave off parliamentary mutiny? Remember the pizza plotters who ousted Theresa May, or the pork pie plotters who were after Boris Johnson? Well, enter stage right, the poppadom plotters, with rumours abound of MPs sat openly in a cafe in Parliament discussing how to get rid of Liz Truss over a curry.
Some are said to be sending letters in to the Backbench 1922 committee, angling for a rule change that could see her replaced. Speaking in Washington today, the Bank of England governor called for stability. His words matching those of the Chancellor.
That flying blind is not a way to achieve sustainability. The OBR is now very much back in the picture.
Andrew Bailey said his first meeting with Jeremy Hunt was a meeting of minds, but today he also raised the spectre of yet further interest rate rises.
We will not hesitate to raise interest rates to meet the inflation target. And as things stand today, my best guess is that inflationary pressures will require a stronger response than we perhaps thought in August.
This, just as speculation around interest rate rises, pushes mortgage rates up and up again. The Resolution Foundation think tank publishing new analysis today, predicting 5 million families will be paying an extra £5,100 a year by the end of 2024. £1,200 of that increase is, they say, directly linked to the mini-budget. Kitchen designer Alex and his partner are on a fixed-rate deal that ends in January. And while building other people's dream homes, he's worried about how much his own will cost.
It's that key word, isn't it? Uncertainty. It's almost impossible to plan for the future without knowing, what your finances are looking like. And with committing to something only a year ago, and now with all these uncertainties, it's a difficult conversation to have.
Uncertainty. That word Liz Truss needs to surgically remove from Trussonomics, or what's left of it, after a new fiscal plan on October the 31st. One overseen by a new Chancellor she hopes will quell the infighting until then.
Poppadom plotters. Treachery has a hearty appetite, clearly. Well, following our exclusive poll yesterday showing just how low support in Liz Truss has sunk even among Tory voters, more than half thought she should resign. Our Home Affairs correspondent Darshna Soni has been to one marginal constituency which turned Conservative at the last election to see if Jeremy Hunt's appointment has made any difference and whether Labour is now sensing victory.
Looked like it was mother and daughter. They were both said they were Labour voters.
Canvassing for an election that hasn't been announced yet. The government may have insisted that we won't be going to the polls anytime soon, but in North Derby, the Labour Party believes they can sense a win.
Hiya, my name's Catherine Atkinson. I'm Labour's candidate at the next general election, whenever that will be.
This is a marginal constituency that has swung between Labour and the Tories, who won in 2019 with a majority of just 2,500.
Certainly doesn't feel like they're paying attention or listening, and I think from my perspective, being an NHS staff member, staff recruitment is a big issue.
Ms Atkinson, a barrister, was selected as their candidate only 4 months ago. In that time, we've seen 2 Prime Ministers and 4 Chancellors.
And what about the sacking of Kwasi Kwarteng, the events of yesterday? Are people responding to that?
I think it's just they feel that everything is chaotic.
Have you been honest with people about what their tax bills will look like under Labour?
Absolutely, and I think that actually what's been so popular on the doorsteps is when we've been talking about great British energy, people just feel that that makes sense to have British
That's the energy company, but what about their taxes?
I don't tend to ever make promises that I can't keep, and I have been clear about what Labour have been offering.
How will the chaos and confusion of the last 24 hours impact the next election? After the pandemonium in politics recently, Labour feel that this is one of the seats they could win back. But many people here tell me that Westminster can feel a world away. And rather than worrying about what will happen to the government next, they're worrying about what will happen to their bills this winter. Richard Brown has voted Tory since he was 18.
Yeah, a long time, and I was hoping to vote for him in the future.
Why have the Tories lost your vote then?
Unfortunately, fiscal economy is the cornerstone of the Conservatives, and I think they've lost it, and they've lost it within 2 weeks. I think if she makes Monday morning, she'll be lucky.
The party is so split. Instead of them all getting together and agreeing together, you know, and sticking with each other, they're just arguing and letting anybody else in. I mean, Labour's going to come in if they keep arguing like that.
Would you normally vote Tory?
Always have done, yes, but it makes me wonder now.
From this constituency at least, then, a warning that the Prime Minister needs to avoid any more reckless moves if she's to survive the days and weeks ahead.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Conservative MP Richard Graham, who's a member of the important Backbench 1922 Committee executive, and I began by asking whether he thought the only thing keeping Liz Truss at number 10 was the absence of a unity candidate to replace her.
Matt, you're firing in with a question that's sort of way above my pay grade. Look, I'm very focused on a rather simpler thing in a sense, which is the financial statement at the end of this month, which needs to reassure markets, get the support of the OBR, the backing of the parliamentary party, and the at least tacit support from around the country that the growth plan is now being implemented in a rather more effective way. And that, I hope, is what our new Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is going to do.
But you might not have the luxury to wait until Halloween at the end of the month if the markets don't like what they see on Monday morning.
Well, Monday morning is really going to be focused, as far as I'm concerned, much more on the emergency energy bill, you know, giving relief to both domestic and non-domestic consumers, which I think will be broadly welcomed everywhere. But you're right. I mean, if markets react in a very volatile way, specifically against aspects of government policy, then that's going to be difficult. But I would have thought that they would be reassured by Jeremy Hunt's interview earlier this morning on BBC.
Although actually during the leadership campaign, it was Jeremy Hunt who also advocated lowering the corporation tax to 15%, which Rishi Sunak described as fairy tale economics. Is he really that reliable?
Well, Jeremy did do that, but that was right at the beginning of the campaign in sort of early July, before it was, I think, quite so obvious how dire the situation was. And Jeremy did, of course, then very much back Rishi Sunak's position that unfunded tax cuts was not the best first approach to tackle inflation. So I think he is definitely reliable. And after all, after a decade in cabinet dealing with a series of crises at the NHS and also at Foreign Affairs, I think he's got huge experience. No doubt this weekend he will, I think he already has, been sitting down with officials trying to work through how the growth plan can be delivered in a way that does make sure the budget is better balanced. And I'm sure he'll come up with a good solution.
But with most of Trussonomics, if we can call it that, buried by Jeremy Hunt, frankly, what is the point of Liz Truss now? I don't mean to be insulting. It's a serious question. What is the point of Prime Minister Liz Truss?
Well, I think, Matt, it's about a simple process point is, you know, we had a change of leadership. The leadership contest was won by the current Prime Minister, and therefore she leads us. And, you know, it's now up to her government to make sure that it comes up with policies which reflect what was in the manifesto we were all elected on in 2019 and does deliver growth, but also is compassionate and reflects the one nation Toryism on which many of us stand. And I think the combination of having Jeremy Hunt at the Treasury alongside her should help stabilise things.
Right, but even before she fired her Chancellor for effectively agreeing with her, the vultures were circling for Liz Truss. Are you getting letters into the 1922 committee, of which you're a member, asking for her to go?
Well, firstly, the letters go to Graham Brady, the chair, but secondly, and he never shares those, quite rightly, but secondly, as you know, there is no mechanism in the 1922 committee to even consider letters until after a year.
Richard Graham, MP, talking to me earlier.